Hello and welcome to the Raw Agility Monthly Live Webcast. Raw Agility is a monthly program dedicated to answering your questions to your situations to empower you to effectively practice agility. Every month, professional Agile trainers address questions submitted by you. You and the community can vote for these questions, and the most popular questions are addressed on this show. My name is John Riley. I am the principal Agile coach and trainer for Ready, Set, Agile, which is an Agile training and Agile coaching company empowering you to practice agility's purpose to obtain feedback rapidly and respond to change. Today, I'm pleased to welcome one of our Dutch professional Scrum trainers, Sander Durr. Sander, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, John, hi. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy being on this side of the microphone for once. Indeed, I'm a lead Agile consultant working at Xavier, as well as a professional Scrum trainer for Scrum.org. I work in all departments, everywhere, throughout the entire organization. So looking forward to answering these questions.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing your practice being applied to some of these questions as well. We got some good questions today. So here's how our format works for those of you who have not joined before. Sander and I will be asking previously submitted questions from rawagility.com. I'll go ahead and put the link here in the Q&A. So Q&A, here we go. Oops, that's the search. That's not that. Okay, so there's the link. So we're going to ask the most popular questions first. And then we're going to answer the questions in a 5-minute time box. And the time is going to be kept by this timer behind me. We'll then ask the next most popular question and then continue that process until their 1-hour time box expires at the end of the show. So if we are asking your question that you personally submitted, you have the option to join the webcast to ask us clarifying questions for answering it. So, Sander, you ready to get started on this?
Definitely. Let's go.
Awesome. Let's do this. Okay. So our first question comes from an anonymous attendee who is asking, how do we ensure the robustness of software architecture from sprint 1 to the last sprint as Agile works on an MVP philosophy? Okay, we start the timer. All right, so I like this question. I really like this question because it's bringing awareness to the fact that software architecture is valuable. Okay, I'll just go off by saying for a product owner, one of the most detrimental parts to value in general is the fact that he does not have a cross-functional team that does not understand software engineering principles, he or she. That said, ensuring that we have a robust software architecture, you still want to turn that over to the team, the developers, as a product owner. In my experience, the best teams have at least one person on the team who understands the architecture of your application. Okay. Many times we don't start from a new ground up solution. A lot of times we inherit solutions that are already architecturally broken. So call that out, have a discovery of that, make everything transparent. That's probably one of the things that I would say is make the fact that your software architecture is broken or it's robust already, make that transparent so that you can actually inspect it and know how you are going to adapt your solution to deliver value continuously. So you might not be delivering new functionality from Sprint 1 if you're using that MVP's philosophy, but work toward that. Just chip away at it. That's probably what I would say. One person, at least one person who is understands engineering principles and make that transparent. Sander, anything to add here?
No, I think that was a really well answered. And it's a continuously emerging thing, so you can't guarantee the entire robustness up front from beginning till the end. So this has to grow. You have to inspect and adapt, and this will change over time continuously.
Awesome. Okay. So whoever asked that, appreciate the answer. I'd love to go into this more. I came from a software architecture background, and I understand what has to go into delivering an MVP. So appreciate the question. Thank you very much. All right, Sander, you're up. You want to take the next one?
All right. Question by Ricardo Salinas. One of the inputs of the sprint planning event meeting is the past performance. How does a team performance should be measured? That's always a tricky question. Now, being a consultant, part of my backpack and part of my ability to help people is always answer everything with the answer, it depends. It depends a lot on whether you want to measure that in velocity, in t-shirt sizes, the story points, gut feeling, whatever you feel is appropriate, the amount of product backlog items you get to a done state. And I think that's the most important thing you want to use as input. Our ability to move and to really deliver a done increment. I think that's the most important thing. And you want to check your past performance of how you've been doing that, whether that's with the story points, with t-shirt sizes. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what you're using as long as you get to a done state. So it depends on, John, what kind of other techniques that you use?
Yeah, so it definitely depends. What I would say for this question is that we try to measure things in agility in an outcome-based format rather than results. Let me explain what that means. So results are, you have an expectation, and did you meet it or not? Yes or no. It's black and white. Okay. Outcome-based, a sprint outcome, for example, is you have a certain expectation or a set of expectations, and then you get another set of actuals that happen during the sprint, and somewhere you meet in the middle. Okay. So like one of them that's black and white is, did you meet the sprint goal? Yes or no. It's maybe yes, but we worked overtime for this and we are exhausted. So that's going to be an input for the next sprint. We did, but we encountered a lot of production bugs along the way. And so now that becomes something that is going to be an input for the next sprint. So it's all based on a set of outcomes, and we make those outcomes transparent so that we can inspect those outcomes, and those become the inputs for the next sprint. Okay. A lot of people think velocity is the only measure. Absolutely not. It is. It's important, but there's many more aspects that are important. Value comes to mind. Was this sprint valuable? Yes or no? It's a tough question, but at the same time, you want to measure value, right? So one of the measurements is that you get a usable, in Scrum, is that you get a usable and useful increment. Did that happen? Yes or no? All right. Yes, but, or no, yes, whatever. Right.
Yeah, I like to stress as well is that past performance is not a guarantee that you're going to be successful in the coming sprint. So don't spend too much time focusing on what you've been able to do in the past, but focus what you know now and how that's going to help you move forward. Sometimes gut feeling is just enough. Sometimes you want to go into a deeper discussion than that. As long as the team is confident that you can pull this off and you measure that afterwards, are we relatively predictable in our forecast? If not, then that would be a discussion for your sprint retrospective, for instance, to see where you can improve. But again, it's all about delivering that value. Don't sweat too much on measuring the performance, rather measure outcomes and what happens afterwards.
Awesome. All right, we're just about out. Anything else you want to add?
No, I hope that answers Ricardo's question and it was useful.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for the question. All right, our next question comes from Thomas, who asks, The IT department is Agile, but the business is Waterfall. What approach do you take to win the business to Agile Scrum? I like this question.
Oh, it's a common one, a really tough one as well.
I agree. It is a tough one, but I've actually got some practical experience here with this. So here's one thing that I would point out here. So you got an IT department. They seem to be using agility fine. Okay, it's successful. First question you have to ask yourself is, or as an organization, do we want to scale this? Does it make sense to scale this? So let's say that, yeah, it's great. We're spreading it around. We're, kind of making this transparent that we are successful here, and here's why. That would be great. Here's where my practical experience comes in. I actually was involved with a corporation that wanted to improve their payroll process through, using something with agility or Scrum or whatever. So they contacted the IT department. So the way that we did this was we had a couple members come from the IT department and actually go to HR. So they reported in HR. Okay. And they actually did improve the process of the payroll system, through incremental delivery, what agility promises and all that kind of stuff, empiricism. And what happened is they ended up staying there. And with successive increments and the fact that this was a success in the HR department, the IT department actually broke apart. So the only thing that was really left in the IT department was an infrastructure segment. So they just handled all of the IT infrastructure, and then the experts in IT went to other departments in the corporation. Maybe try something like that. But the most important thing is to make this transparent, saying, yes, this is successful, but what factors, what outcomes did you have that made this successful? That's how I would do it, or that's how I've done it in the past too. You got any experience with this, Sander, or anything else to add?
I don't have any specific experience with this, but what pops to mind is that this is a very typical thing where organizations try to fit in Scrum into the organization. What I would like you to challenge, Thomas, or how I would like to challenge you, is try to turn that question around, and this is going to be a tough one as well, is how the organization can fit the Scrum team or whatever framework that you're using. This feels like a silo thinking thing, right? You want to fit those departments, they're kept as is, and therefore we try to map those into the Scrum team. See what kind of skills that you need. Break those silos, whether it's IT, business, HR. I think HR should be redesigned anyway, but that's a completely different discussion. But just see what kind of skills that you really need and break the boundaries of the organization rather than trying to fit your framework into the organization. I think that would be a very interesting angle to it.
I'm really happy that you called it out, the siloing. I did see that too. This departmental thinking seems to be a problem, I think, with when it comes to agility. And it's how are we going to help these people succeed in their career? How are we going to compensate them? What benefits are we going to give them? So I'm glad you pointed that out, Sander, because I think that seems to get in the way a lot. Unfortunately, but anyway, I would say, maybe start to chip away at that thinking, get away from that.
Hey, there's a follow-up question in the Q&A by Don Wolford. Not sure how you handle these, and typically in this.
Why don't you go ahead? I'll reset the timer for that too.
Yeah. Is the classic business IT separation an asset or an obstacle to Agile, and how can it be improved upon? I think that kind of ties in with the answer with the angle that I just gave. It can be an obstacle to it. Again, it depends, right? It depends on the mindset of the organization and how rigid they are with treating these boundaries. The classic approach, though, is, in my experience, one of the biggest obstacles, where people are just starting pointing fingers at each other rather than focusing, how can we get to the best outcome? Because ultimately you're still working for the same organization. Therefore, everyone should collaborate, getting the best outcome as possible without thinking in those borders. else you'll just be treating the implementation as mini organizations within that organization, which kind of makes it less agile. So your agile diminishes by keeping these borders as they are. What do you think, John? And I hope this gives you a little food for thought, Don.
I don't have anything to add to that, Sander. 100% agree. So I hope that answered your question, Don. All right.
And how can it be approved upon? I think we skipped a little bit there.
Oh, right.
That's thinking in less borders, but I think that's going to be really challenging the status quo and the entire organization. Try to make it as nimble as possible. Just create small experiments, see what you can do, collaborate with other Scrum Masters from other departments, and how you can cross those borders and try to minimize them as much as possible.
Yeah. One of my good friends, Ben Thorpe, who some of you know, his thing just says chip away at it, right? Basically what Sander was kind of saying.
And people will disagree with it anyway. They're going to hate it.
Yeah.
And that's where we come in. We are the knights who want to persist in this.
Well, hopefully.
I mean, this can be such a frustrating thing, right? Where you see how things can be improved, but organizations tend, especially the classic thing where more of a command and control style is still the status quo. It can be super challenging to break that barrier. And therefore, I would challenge you, Don, to really persevere with this.
Yep.
And thanks for the question.
Yes.
Back to you, John.
No, back to you. I think you're up.
Let's see. We have a small development shop, so our developers are also production support. We reserve time for production support, but how do you suggest most efficiently using developer time with regards to support and new development by an anonymous attendee? That's a really great question. There are a million things that immediately pop to mind, but the first thing that I would consider is incorporating evidence-based management. I'll tell you why. Production support, if I just by the sheer context that I'm currently getting, this is the image that I get to mind, is that you jump on every ticket that's being pushed in. Now, that doesn't tell you anything about whether the value versus effort is in balance. So maybe there's a really small issue that's been put into production support, and it consumes a lot of time from the developers in your team, while the added value is marginal. Evidence-based management gives you just a little bit more of a handle to see if the features that are actually being used, for instance, maybe the person who is raising the issue is the sole person. Now I'm going to exaggerate. Is the sole person using that feature? And if you don't measure it, you don't know whether it's imbalanced, whether the effort versus value that's being derived are actually imbalanced. I think that would be the first thing that I would have a look at. Else, create a guideline, like maybe spend 20% of your capacity on production support and 60% on actual development, and the remaining 20% for any unplanned work. Also leaving a little bit of a capacity for innovation work, making sure that your product continuously gets developed to a new state and you try to uncover new markets or new satisfaction levels. I think those would be my first go-to points. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, I definitely like that evidence-based management approach. What I would also add is turn this over to the team. Okay. During sprint planning, make this transparent. Why are we requiring production support to be included in a product development team? And share what you have. You're the only people that we're a small dev shop. You're the only people who are doing this, and basically, hey, you developed this, and you are accountable for instilling quality. Right? Developers are accountable for, as part of their accountability, is to instill the quality of the product. Okay. That said, the rest of the Scrum team, the Scrum Master and the product owner, have to support that. That's part of the 2020 Scrum Guide. So turn it over to the team. Take that to the team. As a Scrum Master, that's what I would do. I would say, okay, well, here's what's happening. Here's what we got. Turn it over to the team. Maybe they have a better suggestion. But this is definitely one of those take it to the team situations.
Yeah,
what do you recommend?
Maybe the production support items are part for backlog reordering as well, product backlog reordering. Maybe they're completely new features. Maybe they don't need to be jumped upon right away.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, that's fine. No, that's what this is about. So, great question. Happens all the time. In my practice, this is one thing that it gets easily overlooked because it's like, oh, we're releasing value, right? Oh, wait, no, the users are doing something really stupid.
What I do enjoy about this question is that it does show that they're accountable from beginning till the end. And what I still see too often is that when a product is getting to a point that it's able to go to production, it's being handed over to a support team, which doesn't happen in this situation. So kudos to you and your team.
Yep, absolutely. All right, I think we're good, right?
Think so.
All right, reset the timer.
Moving on to Chris.
Yeah, Chris has a good question about this thing we call Scrum Butts. So, question is, how do we ensure the teams are not doing Scrum But? For example, lots of teams run sprints of activity but do not examine workload. So for those who don't understand what a Scrum But is, it's Scrum in the Scrum Guide says that it must be practiced as a whole. And if it's not, then it's immutable, which means basically you're not practicing Scrum. So this is an example of a Scrum But where they're not examining the workload. They're just saying, yeah, we can do it, or they're getting pushed on or whatever is going on. So how do we ensure it? This is actually called out in the Scrum Guide as well. This is a Scrum Master accountability. This is part of what they do, right? They call out these things immediately. So, for example, if the team is not examining their workload, then it's up to the Scrum Master to coach the team to do so. It's that simple. And so that's why your Scrum Master has to have that kind of knowledge, experience, or whatever to go through all these product backlog items or all these tasks or whatever you're doing to organize your sprint planning and say, okay, well, why did you say, yes, you could do this, right? Show me, right? Do you have enough that is ready, that you are ready to make this part of your definition of done? Make this part of your increment, right? Scrum Master, squarely on them. Anything to add, Sander?
Well, yes. Because this doesn't come from the question itself, but I'm working now with a team. I just recently started working with a team that was doing the exact same thing, but basically because the organization required them or more or less forced them. And even my predecessors have not been focusing on the actual outcomes and the efficiency, but were forced by management. Forced might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but they felt the pressure of being more of a glorified feature factory. They had to create as much output as possible without looking into the efficiency of the Scrum framework, as well as the levels of quality that they're delivering. And therefore, they were just pushing out as much stuff as possible. And then that's where you get to Scrum But state. It's not about just taking it to the team and saying you got to do something differently. But this might be an organizational recurring thing where you want to see where does this come from? What compelled the team to say we can do this without looking into workload or like previously discussed the team performance or the past performance? There is more to this question than we can now tell.
Yeah, that is true. All right, I think we're good.
Awesome. I hope that covers your question there, Chris. Exactly. Now, question by Alessio Valentini. Given the Scrum event, which would be the ones who should be led by the product owner, maybe refinement and planning? first things first, refinement is an ongoing activity and not a specific event within Scrum. So you can do that with whatever time box that you want to do. Also, there's nothing stating in the Scrum guide who should facilitate what. Traditionally, in most organizations and most teams that I've been working with, the Scrum Master is the default person to facilitate everything and anything. Now, being the purist here, the Scrum police, if you would, the only thing that the Scrum Master would facilitate according to the Scrum guide is stakeholder collaboration wherever needed or requested. That's the only thing. The product owner, developers, Scrum Master can facilitate everything that they want as long as it's been discussed with the team. For instance, in most of the teams that I've been working with, the product owner is the one who runs the sprint review. In my teams, the developers actually facilitate that event with support from me as a Scrum Master or with my dear counterpart, the product owner. You can do whatever facilitation that you want and who wants to do so. This is the beauty of self-management. Take it to the team, discuss or ask. This is the activity that we're going to be doing. This is the event that we're coming up with. Who wants to facilitate? Maybe there are people in your team that would really like to develop a skill, but they're just scared to speak up. Maybe someone has a very specific way of telling something. Maybe your stakeholders would like to see a different face in facilitation as well. To give you a different example of that, I worked with a relatively large team in the past, 15 people, and there was always the same team member between the rest of the team and the stakeholders. So the feedback coming from the stakeholders, which was predominantly positive, let me put that out first, but that feedback was always being told to the rest of the team by the same person. The effect of that is that the emotions that were experienced by the team are completely different than when you would have the actual stakeholders telling that to the team directly. Else, you'll just continuously be in the same scene, the same face, giving you the same message over and over. It doesn't have the same load and the same emotion when it's continuously the same person. What's your experience, John?
Yeah, I agree with you, Sander. I'm going to take an answer another way. Well, first by agreeing with you by saying, yeah, the Scrum Guide is not specific on who leads what event. So by default, though, for a team that's just starting out practicing Scrum, by default, it's the Scrum Master that can facilitate everything. Unwritten rule, don't quote me on it, especially for a daily Scrum, right? No one knows what to do during a daily Scrum, right? That said, one of my philosophies with the Scrum Master is the Scrum Master's main job is to work themselves out of a job. Okay, so it's up for, like Sander was saying, it's up for the team to be self-managing, right? So coach the team to facilitate their own events. So for sprint planning, the product owner might be the right person. It could be a developer. Sometimes I turn those over to developers when I'm a Scrum Master, saying, okay, here, go ahead and facilitate the event, right? That's all I really have to add.
Just coming back to your example of the daily Scrum, and with those starting teams, you're not necessarily a facilitator. I guess you would be more of a teacher, just getting them up to speed, and you're not. Don't take that as a facilitator because people will continuously look at you. Be clear on, I'm going to help you get into the motion of this and get you through and up to speed with these events. I'm just a teacher. I'm not necessarily the facilitator, and we'll see whoever facilitates what or leads what event down the line. That's all, Your Honor.
I like it. All right. I think we're good.
Awesome.
You're up.
No, this was my question.
Oh, that was your question. Is this mine then? Okay. All right. Fair enough. So I'll go ahead and paste it in the chat. So, asked by Brian, going on the what and the how, is feature delivery valuable? The product owner comes up with the feature, the developers create the stories and complete said feature, or is this too driving? So, if you saw my Ask a PST session, you understood that I have a philosophy of separating the what from the how. So, what is the business need, and the how is going to be how the people, the doers, the developers, whatever you want to call them, are going to develop or create said features in this example, right? So we measure this on the Stacy diagram. Oh, forgot to reset the timer. I'll take a minute off. So the what and the how are basically separating the business need from the how, or how you're going to do it. We measure this on a Stacy diagram, and we actually have an activity, and I coach organizations to use this to say, hey, is Scrum the right thing to use? So let's say that we have this feature delivery. Is it valuable? Well, if you think it's valuable, then yes, it's valuable. Just know how you are going to deliver a feature, right? What constitutes a feature, right? It's still, you're putting things in the product backlog that are product backlog items that are just units of work, and you are incrementally delivering said features or said product backlog items. Can the product owner come up with the feature and the developers create the stories to complete said feature? Yes. If you feel like that's the way you want to do it, then do it that way. Make it empirical, right? Most important thing is to make it empirical. Try this approach, see how it works, inspect and adapt. If something is not making sense, if you're putting too much business pressure on the developers and you see that, change your strategy. That's why we have Scrum and Agility. It's incremental delivery. It's about empiricism. That's basically it. Anything to add, Sander?
No, I just echo what you said.
Fair enough. Let's do another question then.
All right. Move into, I hope I pronounce your name correctly, Jovan Jelicic, or Jelicic, not sure. Can you share best practices for managing and utilizing team members working on multiple and not connected projects, helping the dev team to increase its velocity? John, I have two best practices, organization or even standards throughout the entire world. One, just don't. And two, if you're going to do it, lower the amount of projects that people are working on simultaneously. Why? Because of the context switching. If I'm trying to, this stupid exercise where you have to rub your head in circles and try to create a square on your belly, that's the same thing. You just can't. You can do one thing, and you can't do both in the same quality levels, and that's what's happening here with your team as well. Quality is going to deteriorate when you're working on multiple projects at once, and especially when they're not connected. And if you want to look at increasing velocity, it's kind of the same thing. Velocity is not there to increase or to decrease or whatever. It's velocity is a measurement for. It's not even a measurement. It's more of input for the Scrum team to create a forecast, to base their forecast on, one of the inputs. It's not something that you want to increase or do something else with. Avoid comparing your velocity continuously or try to lower that or higher that, because it's going to be a management metric really fast if you do that, and things are really easy to game in that sense. You just slap a different number on it, and voila, we have a new higher velocity. We've performed better. But it doesn't say anything about the levels of quality that you're delivering. So getting back to your question, A, don't. B, if you're going to do it, lower the amount of projects that you're working on simultaneously. I've been, in the past, I've been working with a large sports performance goods, let's keep it at that, organization. And I was working on two teams, being a Scrum Master with two teams, and they were completely unrelated. And I had so much trouble switching to their local context when one of my developers would come up to me and went, do you remember when I was talking about this and this issue and it has this and this effect? And I was like, damn, I just got back from the other team. I really have to get up to speed. It took me so much effort to get back into their context of each team. Multiple projects will only deteriorate quality. John?
Exactly. Don't. The the thinking behind that is that if you have one person working on two different projects, they're going to be 50% effective in both, when in actuality they're at the most 25% effective in both. Yeah, and as a developer, as a Scrum Master, what I would do is I would empower the developers to call that kind of stuff out. It's like, we're working on 5 different things. Our quality is suffering. We're not going to be able to do anything else. We got to get out of this rut. We got to work on one thing. So figure out incrementally how you can allow those people to work on different or just one product. Don't let skills get in the way either. It's not a skills thing. It's like if you have a skill in one technology or whatever, where I would see the smell then is I would see the smell in how you've defined your products. Maybe go back and look at that and see if that might be something that might be a problem, right? So don't do this.
Both dependencies and lead time are going to increase.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Good call out. And with dependencies, make that transparent as soon as you see the dependencies so that you can figure out how you're going to have 2 or multiple teams work on that thing.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Great answer. Great question. Happens a lot. All right. Who's up?
Heinrich.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
Heinrich Bauhausen. So you're up. Question
I'm
by
up.
Heinrich
That's what I
Bauhausen.
was asking. Okay. Let me reset the timer. It was about to go off. Okay. So from Heinrich, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Heinrich.
We have this question. Being a new certified Scrum Master, do you have a suggestion how to address job adverts where the companies ask for some years of experience? Great question. So congratulations on being a new certified Scrum Master. Welcome to the community. Make sure you utilize your community wherever you happen to be. A lot of times when I see job advertisements, they have a canned job description from the Scrum guy, which kills me. How do you address the ones that have years of experience? I would call it out. If you get an interview for this company, I would say, well, where did you get 5 years experience of a Scrum Master? Right? Why do you need this? Or just completely ignore it. So that's how I would address that. Just ask why. A lot of times when I go into an organization as a Scrum Master and Agile coach, I'll ask one simple question: why agility? Right? Goes back to the purpose of, we're trying to obtain feedback rapidly and respond to change. Right? That's agility's purpose in a nutshell. And I will say, as a Scrum Master in one organization, I don't think I've lasted any more than 3 years. Scrum Master is a tough job. So if they haven't moved on from a Scrum Master, maybe why are we still allowing a Scrum Master to be here for 5 years or more? I don't know. But yeah, question it. That's what I would do, is say, why do you need so many years experience? Why not one? If you're in a Scrum Master job for 1 year, that's a lot.
Yeah, what are you hoping to get out of it?
Right. What are we hoping to get out of that?
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think that would be the easiest thing.
Yeah. All right, cool.
I hope that helps, Heinrich. Then a question by Suba Narayanan. Sorry. Do we really have to use story points? If so, what's the best way to use them? Thanks. Short answer, no, you don't. You don't have to. There's no one forcing you to do anything. And you'll probably agree with me on this as well, John. A lot of times when I come into an organization where previous Agile coaches that are more religious about this, that really treat Scrum and Agile as a religion, and they start with instilling story points, this becomes Scrum, right? This, because they have been doing this and been explaining this, it becomes Scrum. In most organizations, the default way of estimation is by using story points, and therefore a lot of teams really believe that they have to use story points, while it's just a technique for estimation. And I know by a fact that the person who created or who wrote the book on estimation is now very sorry and really regrets ever to have written the book, because of the way this is being treated in most organizations, especially corporate organizations, where the use of these story points and the estimation has vastly been surpassed by its actual use. It's more of a very rigid promise instead of a forecast, and one of those ways to create some kind of a forecast. What do you think, John?
Yeah, no, you don't have to use story points, as Sandra was saying. I think it's important also to understand why story points. Story points were there for to get people out of the thinking of absolute estimation. That is, using hours. How many hours do you think this is going to take? 40. Well, the reason behind that, as Sandra was saying, the reasons behind that are because humans are really terrible estimators. We suck at it. So, story points are there just to get you out of that thinking, and really it's to get you from absolute estimation to something called relative estimation, which is basically saying, given this that we've already done and this new thing that we have, what is the comparison of this new thing to this old thing that we did in terms of effort, size, and complexity? Okay. So that's it. What I like about what Agility and Scrum have started to do is they're getting away from this idea that we need to estimate. You might have heard about the no estimations movement, and you've probably heard me from previous broadcasts say that estimation is a complete waste of time. Spend as little time as you can on estimation. It makes no sense. And just take this product backlog item and say, can we fit this in a sprint, right? You'll know that I'm a proponent of Kanban too. So using Scrum and Kanban, Kanban doesn't even use estimations. Kanban is just based on work items. This thing, let's get it through our definition of done, or our workflow, definition of workflow. So no, I would actually as a Scrum Master, I would encourage you not to use story points. Makes no sense. And it's just there for a planning tool for the team, right? And people weaponize it, and I don't even want to get into that. So yeah, you don't have to.
Exactly. Getting back to the absolute estimation. So to give an example that I always use, if I would drive from my house to Rome, I live in the center of the Netherlands in a small city called Culemborg. If I would drive to Rome, according to Google Maps, it would take me 16 hours and 40 minutes. The likelihood of me not achieving this in exactly 16 hours and 40 minutes is very high. A lot of things can happen along the way. Toll gates, traffic jam, maybe an airplane just tumbles down and falls on top of my car, and I can't continue to drive anymore. Anything can happen. Therefore, your estimate, by doing it in absolute hours, is going to suck, and it's not going to happen anymore. But you're going to be blamed for that because you promised that you would do it in 16 hours and 40 minutes. So, no, you don't have to use it.
Awesome. All right. I think we're good.
All right, John, you're up again. We have another question by Heinrich.
Oh, yes. Heinrich was active in question asking today.
Good stuff.
All right. So Heinrich asks, any suggestions on how to deal with companies in transition? We try to put everything they deem to be done into the product backlog instead of having the product owner make the choice. Well, my first suggestion here is to allow your Scrum Master to be empowered to make all the decisions on the product. For one reason only, is because the product owner is the value maximizer. They are solely responsible for maximizing the value of the product. That's basically it. Figure out how you can allow your stakeholders to kind of take a back seat, but also allow them to come to the sprint reviews to provide their feedback, because that's what's valuable to the team. It's about maximizing value. It's that simple. Yeah, I don't have any specific techniques to do that. Just to allow the product owner to be the one in charge for the product. Do you have any specific examples? Do you have anything to add here?
Well, no, I think the main trick here, the main technique is learn to say no. I mean, anyone can chug anything into the product backlog. Any stakeholder could do so. Ultimately, when it boils down, still the product owner is the one calling the shots, and he can remove or add or do anything with the product owner as he or with the product owner, with the product backlog as he or she deems fit.
Learn to say no. I like that. Yeah. Okay.
Hope that covers the question, Anja.
I hope so too. All right, you're up, man.
Question by Anonymous. As a Scrum Master, I got confused how to be more effective with high-performance teams, and sometimes I feel my role is not mandatory to the team. Personally, I struggled with this in the past as well. The thing is, when your team is indeed high-performing, and they're probably not going to be agreeing with this because there's so much that they could work on and that they could improve. But when your team is really high-performing, your need to be fully allocated to that team is going to diminish. So especially in the beginning, when you have new teams, you're going to be working with them a lot, and you're going to be busy with focusing on the team themselves quite a bit. But as soon as they are really, the more high performing that they get, the less time that you really need to spend with them. And you'll be spreading to the wider organization, working more with management, leadership, stakeholders, maybe even taking up a next team if that allows you to still to focus and to be effective with the right people and the right Scrum teams. But there's nothing stopping you from looking beyond just your Scrum team when the team is high performing. Actually, to be honest, when you look at the Scrum Guide, the Scrum Master works with the product owner, the developers, as well as the wider organization, whether that's working together with other teams, getting them up to speed and instilling the Scrum framework, or what I've been doing, for instance, working a lot with HR and marketing. What I like about working with HR is challenging them on the way that annual reviews are being done. Because personally, I feel that annual reviews are pretty weird. You discuss once or twice a year how your performance is and what you're doing, and how effective you are and what you can improve. But when we look at our Scrum teams, we inspect and adapt at least once a month, right? Depending on your cadence and the length of your sprint. And that gives you the ability to pivot and to inspect and adapt your performance. Yet for our own performance, for our personal performance, we do that only once or twice a year. So you could start challenging those things as well if your team is high performing. Any specific experience with that, John?
No, I would. The only thing that I would add to your answer is to, question. Have the Scrum Master question: is Scrum right for this team? Or, where am I needed? I mean, if you're confused, that sounds like a good feeling or a good indicator for saying, well, okay, maybe it's time for me to move on, or Scrum right.
Something that just popped up. Netflix has this chaos monkey, right? This tool that just randomly breaks stuff to test the rigidity of your product. I think that would be a fun thing to do as well. So my team is high performing. What I'm going to do now is actively break their stuff. Just pull a plug and see what happens. See if the product is high performing as well. Mm-hmm. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. I'd like to see that experiment. All right. All right. Next question.
Next question. Go ahead.
All right. So, any tips for implementing Scrum for teams that are service/operational teams whose resources are shared by the product development teams, or are business/user research teams who create and send work to those dev teams? So, I've actually got experience with this as well. So what they try to do is they tried to make service. This was actually in a bank. So you probably know with a bank, if you've ever worked there, they subscribe to many, many services to be able to get what they need to get done. Different kind of service, but still the same thing. They tried to make this team a Scrum team, and it absolutely didn't work for obvious reasons, right? A lot of them are kind of pointed out here. It's like, well, where do we put them at what time? So what they did is they expected and adapted, and they said, well, we're not going to make them a Scrum team. We're just going to make them a pool of experts so that they can be an expert in some team for some sprint. So then it became a challenge to the product owners of saying, okay, well, who are we going to use for what time? The developers have said, well, we're going to need them for this and that and the other thing. Dependencies crept up. So it was just a matter of transparency at that point. And then knowing who was going to be able to work on what product at what time. That said, another thing that came up was, all right, well, we can't train our service people to be able to, know everything about the product every time. So we turned it over to them and said, okay, well, how can we best effectively train? They came up with engineering techniques like pair programming, mob development. They actually tried. So that was basically it. They broke down that team, and they were no longer a Scrum team. They just became, resources, and that seemed to work.
Hey, can we divert from calling people resources?
Yes, that's good. Good call out. Thank you. Yes, they're people. Yes.
I really hate when organizations call people resources, because my mouse is a resource. Because a person is not my mouse. People are not dispensable. Like, you can just throw them out.
Yep. All right. Good call out. Anything else to add to what I said?
No, specifically, cool. Actually.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to put it then.
Then continuing to a question by, I think this is the same person as we had just before, except his name has changed the other way. Now we have Valenti Alessio, and the previous one was Alessio Valenti. What is the difference between an Agile Manager and an Agile Leader? Well, that's a good question. The difference, and I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, or you have a different perspective, John. A manager is someone who's really focused on content and who's more concerned about what and how to deliver and to work and best practices and these kind of things. Whereas a leader is more setting a direction, setting an environment. For instance, a psychological, safe environment where it's okay to fail and leads by example, rather than a manager is more someone who has been working up from content on and experience on, and therefore comes to a point where you can oversee multiple people and coach or tell them what to do and boss people around. Is a bit crude, but it's more on the content, whereas a leader is more about setting the environment and the direction.
Yeah, that's how I'm kind of interpreting that. In my experience, I think you framed it up very well. Manager of people versus setting a direction. You could see that, if as Scrum, the way it's defined with its accountabilities, the leadership positions are the Scrum Master and the product owner. And there's people that manage them from a people perspective, but I don't think there's anything else.
In my experience with managers, quite often, especially when they're working up from content and they just get offered that position because of ways of seniority or years of experience or whatsoever, they get into a position based on that, not because they're able to actually manage people. So they're trained to do work rather than trained to actually manage. And therefore, I feel management is one of the most recurring topics, especially middle management, why implementations of Agile fail any framework. Also, if you look back into the annual State of Agility report by the Standards Group, I believe, by heart, it's the 15th year, something like that, that they've done this Agile annual report, and consistently anywhere in the top 6 is middle management for reasons of failing to adopt an Agile mindset. And I think it's because of this, because they're not trained to actually manage and to lead by example, but to manage content-wise.
Excellent. All right. We good with that one?
We good. Hopefully. That's up to Alessio to decide.
Yep. Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Let me reset the timer.
All right. We're already almost an hour in.
I could talk about this stuff continuously.
Yeah. Shout out to Don and Roger for bearing with us for an hour.
Yeah. All right. So our final question comes from an anonymous attendee who says, we are using, I'm assuming that's US as user stories in our sprints, the team MVP. I think there is something wrong here. Have you had this situation sometime? How did you find a solution? So, okay, we've got, looks like we've got some user story compliance going on of how we're going to get things ready.
This feels like Waterfall, John.
It feels a little waterfallish, yeah. That's kind of where I was going to go first. But the dev team doesn't want to test each user story and wait for the whole MVP. Well, this is squarely on the dev team then. Because like I was saying before previously in the broadcast, the developers are responsible for instilling quality and making sure that quality is upheld. So we have to get out of this thinking. And so as a Scrum Master, if I was to have this situation, I would start to challenge, why are we doing it this way? Why does the developers feel like they don't need to test? Maybe we got a lot of siloing going on. Which is kind of what Sander was referring to, and he was saying that this feels a little waterfallish. So we got to get out of that thinking, all right? So we need to develop quality at a quality increment according to the definition of done that is instilled by the developers. Start there. That's where exactly where I would start with this situation. And I would put it right to the team saying, you're responsible for this. If you don't want to do it, then this is squarely on you. And as a product owner, I would make sure that we get this solved as soon as possible. What do you have to add here, Sander?
Well, Scrum, assuming that your team is using Scrum, because you mentioned sprints, Scrum is a framework for, amongst others, managing risk, right? Lowering risk. By doing it like this, only testing the whole MVP, you're not lowering risk. You're exposing yourself to a higher amount of risk, because your user stories in this case might not work together and might not integrate as good as possible as you might have thought. Therefore, testing as early as possible is going to help you uncover the most insights as soon as you can. Therefore, supporting the entire empirical process control that Scrum is based on. Not doing that is going to have you create a lot of rework, a lot of frustration, and it's just wasting your client's money, basically. You're throwing away a whole lot of money that you could have saved just by testing up front.
Yep.
That's what I have to add.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Well, I think we're just about done with the hour, so that's about wraps it up. Appreciate to those who stuck with us till the end. I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat right now that is a feedback form. It's just a one-question Google form. We really appreciate your feedback. We're going to incorporate this into future broadcasts. So especially on this new platform that we're on, I'd like to get some feedback on that as well. But just a reminder that Raw Agility comes to you live every second Monday of the month at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, which is now 1500 UTC. And our next broadcast is going to be April 11th. So please submit your questions to rawagility.com. We'd love to hear your questions and what you're struggling with agility. And you can also register for future webcasts at readysetagile.com/events. Sander, thank you very much for your wonderful insights and your experience. I really appreciate you joining the broadcast today.
Love being here, man. I really enjoy this.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all the time we have. See you next time.
This time box, man. Impeccable.
Yeah, I tell you what.